The Friday night air in Savannah was thick enough to chew on, a humid blanket that smelled of the brackish Savannah River, fried seafood, and expensive perfume. River Street was alive with the chaotic energy of the weekend, a cobblestone strip teeming with tourists, locals, and thousands of college students looking to blow off steam after midterms. The historic gas lamps flickered against the worn brick of the old cotton warehouses, casting long dancing shadows that seemed to hide as many secrets as the city itself. Maya, a 21-year-old art history major, pushed through the crowd, feeling the sweat prickle on her neck. She had lost her friends somewhere between the last karaoke bar and the candy shop. Her phone buzzed in her purse with weak signals, the battery icon flashing red at 12%, a common casualty of a night spent taking photos and texting. She wasn't panicked yet, just annoyed and ready to go home to her apartment on the other side of the historic district. She stopped near a railing overlooking the dark water of the river, trying to get a better signal to call an Uber. The noise of the crowd was deafening, a mix of live cover bands, drunken laughter, and the distant horn of a cargo ship navigating the channel. Maya adjusted the strap of her purse, feeling a sudden prickling sensation on the back of her neck, the reprimal instinct that she was being watched. She turned around, scanning the sea of faces moving along the cobblestones. At first, she saw nothing but a blur of strangers enjoying the night. Then her eyes locked onto a man leaning against a brick column near a dark alley entrance. He was dressed in a polo shirt and khaki shorts, looking like any other frat boy or young professional, but his eyes were different. They were fixed on her, unblinking and predatory, cutting through the crowd with an intensity that made Maya's stomach turn. He wasn't smiling. He was calculating. He held a plastic cup of beer in one hand, but he wasn't drinking. He was just holding it, using it as a prop to blend in while he hunted. Maya quickly turned back to the river, her heart rate spiking. She told herself she was being paranoid, that he was probably just looking at something behind her. She checked her phone, again still no service on the lower level of River Street. She decided to walk up the steep, historic stone stairs, the steps of death, to Bay Street, where the signal would be better and the lighting brighter. She began to move, walking briskly past the tourist traps and souvenir shops. She didn't look back, afraid that if she did, she would see him following. The cobblestones were uneven under her sandals, forcing her to watch her feet, which made her feel vulnerable and exposed. As she reached the base of the stone stairs, she risked a glance over her shoulder. The crowd had parted slightly, and she saw him. He was moving now, mirroring her pace, pushing through a group of tourists without apologizing. He had ditched the cup of beer. He was closing the distance. Panic flared in Maya's chest, hot and sharp. She gripped her keys in her hand, threading them through her fingers, like she'd seen in self-defense videos on TikTok. She started climbing the stairs, her breath coming in short gasps, the humidity making her feel like she was breathing underwater. The stairs were steep and shadowed, flanked by high stone walls that muffled the sounds of the party below. Halfway up, the sounds of River Street sounded miles away. It was just the sound of her own breathing and the heavy, slapping footsteps echoing behind her. She reached the top level, Bay Street, expecting safety. But at this hour, away from the bars, the upper street was surprisingly empty. The old oak trees, draped in Spanish moss, blocked out the streetlights, creating pools of ink-black darkness on the sidewalk. She turned right, heading toward where she thought a taxi stand might be. She walked faster, almost jogging now. She heard the footsteps behind her speed up, matching her rhythm. He wasn't hiding it anymore. He knew she knew. She saw a shortcut ahead, an alleyway that cut between two large historic buildings, leading to a well-lit parking garage. It was dark, a narrow throat of brick and shadow, but the garage lights beckoned at the other end, like a lighthouse. It was a risk, but staying on the open street felt like being a sitting duck. Maya made a split-second decision and ducked into the alley. The air instantly grew cooler and smelled of damp mold and old garbage. She hurried over the cracked pavement, eyes fixed on the light ahead. Suddenly, a figure stepped out from the shadows near the garage end of the alley, blocking the exit. It wasn't the man following her. It was a dumpster truck backing up, blocking the light, trapping her in the darkness. She stopped, turning around to go back to the street, but the way back was gone. The man in the khakis stood at the entrance of the alley, silhouetted against the streetlights of Bay Street. He stepped into the darkness with her. He smiled, and the sound of the city seemed to vanish completely. The alley was a canyon of brick, narrow and suffocating. The walls stretched up 3 stories on either side, blocking out the moon and leaving only the faint ambient glow of the city to see by. Maya backed away, her shoes scraping loudly on the grit and trash scattered on the ground. She was trapped between the blocked exit and the man slowly advancing toward her. Wait up," the man called out. His voice was casual, smooth, the voice of a guy who thought he was charming. It made the situation even more terrifying. He didn't sound like a monster. He sounded like a guy you'd meet in class, which made his actions feel surreal. "Stay away from me," Maya said, her voice shaking but louder than she expected. She held up her hands, keys protruding from her knuckles. "I'm meeting my boyfriend. He's right around the corner." It was a lie, a desperate attempt to create a phantom protector. The man, whose name was Kyle, didn't stop. He chuckled, a low, dry sound. "No, you're not," he said, stepping over a puddle of stagnant water. "I saw you at the bar. You were fighting with your friends. You've been alone for 40 minutes. The precision of his observation chilled Maya to the bone. He'd been watching her for nearly an hour. He had catalogued her movements, her isolation, her vulnerability. He had been waiting for this exact moment. "I have pepper spray," Maya lied again, backing up until her heels hit the metal of a dumpster. She was running out of room. The blocked exit behind her offered no escape, only a dead end. "Relax, I just want to talk," Kyle said, holding his hands up in a mock gesture of surrender, though he kept moving forward. "You're really pretty. I just wanted to get your number." "Why do you have to be so difficult?" "I said no," Maya shouted. "Leave me alone." She looked up at the windows of the buildings above, hoping to see a light, a face, anyone. But the windows were dark, shutters closed tight against the night. This part of the city was mostly law offices and businesses, empty after 5 o'clock. Kyle stopped about 10 feet away. He dropped the nice guy act. His face hardened, the shadows accentuating the sharp angles of his jaw. "You know, that's the problem with girls like you," he sneered. "You think you're too good to be polite." He took another step, invading her personal space. The air in the alley felt heavy, charged with violence. Maya could smell him now, cheap cologne, and the metallic tong of adrenaline. "Please," Maya whispered, her bravado crumbling. "Just let me go." "I won't say anything. We're just getting started," Kyle said. He lunged forward, closing the gap in a second. Maya screamed, a high, piercing sound that echoed off the brick walls. She swung her hand, the keys raking across Kyle's forearm. He hissed in pain, but didn't stop. He grabbed her wrist, twisting it hard. The keys clattered to the ground. Maya cried out as pain shot up her arm. Kyle slammed her back against the brick wall, pinning her there with his body weight. He was heavy, solid, and fueled by a twisted sense of entitlement. "You like to scratch," Kyle grunted, his face inches from hers. "I like a fighter." He used his free hand to grab her hair, yanking her head back, exposing her throat. Maya kicked and thrashed, her free hand clawing at his face, his shirt, anything she could reach. But he was stronger, and he had the advantage of leverage. He pressed his forearm against her throat, cutting off her air, silencing her screams into choked gasps. The world began to swim at the edges of her vision. Black spots danced in the darkness. She felt a tear slide down her cheek, hot and hopeless. She thought of her mum. She thought of the text she hadn't sent. Kyle was busy, focused on his victim, focused on his power trip. He felt invincible in the shadows of the historic city. He thought he was the only predator in the alley. He didn't hear the sound at first. It was a heavy, rhythmic sound coming from the street entrance of the alley. Clomp, clomp, clomp. It was the sound of heavy engineer boots hitting the pavement. Slow, deliberate, heavy. Kyle froze. He lifted his head, listening. The footsteps stopped. A shadow fell over them, darker than the night around them. Kyle kept one hand pinned on Maya's chest, but he turned his head toward the entrance of the alley. "Get lost," he shouted over his shoulder, assuming it was a homeless person or a lost tourist. "We're busy here." The figure didn't move. It stood at the mouth of the alley, blocking the ambient light from Bay Street. It was a massive silhouette, broad-shouldered and imposing. The stranger took a slow drag from a cigarette, the cherry glowing bright orange in the darkness, then flicked it to the ground in a shower of sparks. "I don't think you are," a voice rumbled. It was deep, gravelly, and sounded like a car engine trying to turn over on a cold morning. It wasn't a shout. It was a statement of fact that carried more weight than a scream. Kyle squinted, trying to make out the features of the intruder. "I said, beat it, man, unless you want trouble." Kyle was running on adrenaline and arrogance, blind to the danger standing 10 yards away. The figure stepped forward, moving out of the backlight and into the dim gray of the alley. The light caught the chrome of a belt buckle, the heavy chain wallet hanging from a hip, and finally, the patches on the leather vest. The death-head-winged skull grinned in the semi-darkness. The bottom rocker read Georgia. The man was a Hell's Angel. He was huge, with a beard that reached his chest and arms covered in ink that disappeared under his cut. His name was Crow. He had parked his bike, a custom diner, just around the corner to check a rattling heat shield. He had heard the scream. He hadn't hesitated. Crow didn't run. He walked with a terrifying calmness. He cracked his knuckles as he walked, a sound like dry wood snapping. He looked at Kyle. Then he looked at Maya pinned against the wall. Maya saw him. She saw the patch. In any other situation she might have been afraid of the biker. But right now, looking at the pure, cold rage in his eyes directed at her attacker, he looked like a savior sent from the depths of hell. "Let her go," Crow said. He stopped 6 feet away. He stood with his hands loose at his sides, ready. Kyle laughed, a nervous, high-pitched sound. "Or what, you gonna call the cops? Biker trash." Kyle released Maya slightly, turning fully to face the new threat. He pulled a small switchblade from his pocket, flicking it open. The blade glinted weakly. Crow looked at the knife. He looked at it with bored indifference. He didn't flinch. He didn't step back. He actually smiled, but it wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a wolf finding a rabbit that wanted to fight. "That's a mistake," Crow said softly. "Back off," Kyle yelled, waving the knife. "I'm not afraid of you fat old men in leather." Crow shook his head slowly. "You should be." Maya took the opportunity. While Kyle was distracted, she kneed him in the groin with everything she had left. Kyle howled, bending double, his grip on the knife loosening. Crow moved. For a big man, he moved with frightening speed. He closed the gap in a single stride. He didn't go for the weapon. He went for the man. Crow's hand, the size of a shovel, clamped around Kyle's throat. He lifted the younger man up, slamming him back against the opposite wall of the alley. The air left Kyle's lungs in a rush. The knife clattered to the pavement, useless. Maya slid down the wall, gasping for air, clutching her throat. She watched, wide-eyed, as the dynamic shifted instantly. The predator was now the prey. Crow held Kyle against the wall with one hand, his feet dangling inches off the ground. Crow leaned in close, his face inches from Kyle's terrified eyes. "You like hurting women," Crow whispered. "You like making them scared." Kyle clawed at the leather-gloved hand, crushing his windpipe, his legs kicking uselessly. He tried to speak, to beg, but only strangled squeaks came out. His face was turning a mottled shade of red and purple. The arrogance that had fueled him moments ago had evaporated, replaced by primal terror. Crow wasn't in a rush. He held him there, letting the lack of oxygen do the work for a moment. He looked over at Maya. "You okay, darling?" he asked, his voice shifting to a surprisingly gentle rumble. Maya nodded, unable to speak, tears streaming down her face. She pulled her knees to her chest, trying to make herself small. "Good," Crow said. He turned his attention back to Kyle. "Now, about you." Crow released his grip on Kyle's throat. But before Kyle's feet could touch the ground, Crow drove a fist into his stomach. It was a short, controlled punch, but it carried the weight of a sledgehammer. Kyle folded in half, vomiting bile onto his own shoes. He collapsed to the dirty alley floor, gasping for air, clutching his midsection. He curled into a fetal position, whimpering. "Get up," Crow said, standing over him. "Please," Kyle wheezed, spit hanging from his lip. I'm sorry. Take my wallet. Take whatever you want." "I don't want your money," Crow said, disgusted. He reached down and grabbed Kyle by the back of his polo shirt, hauling him to his feet like a sack of laundry. "I want you to understand something." Crow threw him. He literally threw a grown man 5 feet through the air. Kyle crashed into a stack of empty cardboard boxes and trash bags, sending debris flying. He groaned, rolling over, trying to crawl away. Crow followed him. He kicked Kyle in the ribs. Not a stomp, just a hard, instructive kick that cracked bone. Kyle screamed, a jagged, wet sound. "You pull a knife," Crow said, pacing around him. "You corner a girl. You think you're a tough guy." Kyle tried to scramble backward on his hands and knees. "I didn't mean to. I was drunk." "It was a mistake." "A mistake is spilling a beer," Crow growled. "This?" He grabbed Kyle's hand. The one that had held the knife and stepped on it. He ground his heel down. Kyle shrieked in agony. "This is a choice." Maya watched, mesmerized and horrified. The violence was brutal, efficient, and completely one-sided. It was the kind of violence that existed outside the law, a primal justice that she had never seen before. Crow grabbed Kyle by the hair again, lifting his face out of the dirt. "Look at her," Crow commanded, pointing at Maya. Kyle squeezed his eyes shut, crying openly, "Now. I can't. Please, look at her," Crow roared, the sound echoing off the brick walls like thunder. Kyle forced his eyes open, looking at the girl he had terrorized moments before. He saw her fear, but he also saw that she was protected now. "She ain't prey," Crow whispered into Kyle's ear. "And you ain't a hunter. You're just dirt. And I sweep dirt." Crow landed one final blow, a heavy right hook to the jaw that knocked Kyle out cold. His head hit the pavement with a final thud. He lay there, twisted and broken, in the trash where he belonged. Crow stood up, adjusting his vest. He checked his knuckles. He wasn't even breathing hard. The violence had taken less than a minute. The silence returned to the alley, broken only by Maya's ragged breathing and the distant sound of traffic. The monster was down. The dark angel was standing. Crow turned away from the unconscious body of Kyle and walked over to Maya. He stopped a few feet away, giving her space, dropping to one knee to make himself less imposing. He took off his sunglasses, revealing tired human eyes surrounded by wrinkles. "He ain't gonna hurt you no more," Crow said softly. "You got my word." Maya looked at him. She saw the 1% patch. She saw the tattoos, but she didn't feel fear anymore. She felt a profound, overwhelming gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice cracking. He was double quotes, "I know," Crow said, cutting her off gently. He reached into his vest pocket and pulled out a clean white handkerchief. He handed it to her. "Wipe your face, kid. You're safe now." Maya took the cloth, her hands shaking. She wiped the tears and dirt from her cheeks. "Did you... Is he dead?" she asked, looking at the heap of khaki and limbs near the dumpster. Crow glanced back. "No, just sleeping. He'll wake up in a hospital or a cell. Doesn't matter which." Crow stood up and offered her a hand. His hand was rough, calloused and scarred, but he pulled her up with a surprising gentleness. "Can you walk?" "I think so," Maya said, testing her legs. They were wobbly, but they held. "My bike is right around the corner," Crow said. "I'm gonna walk you out to the main street. We'll find a cop, or your friends. Whoever you want." "My friends are gone," Mia admitted. "My phone is dead." "Then we'll use mine," Crow said. He pulled a heavy-duty smartphone from his pocket. "We'll get you an Uber, or I'll wait with you until the police come. Your call." Maya looked at the exit of the alley. She looked at Kyle's body. "I just want to get out of here." "Let's go," Crow said. He positioned himself between her and the unconscious attacker, shielding her view as they walked past. He ushered her toward the light of Bay Street. As they emerged from the darkness of the alley, the humidity hit them again. The streetlights buzzed. A few tourists walked by, glancing nervously at the massive biker walking next to the disheveled college girl. They didn't know that the monster was the one lying in the dark behind them. Crow didn't care about their stares. He stood on the corner with Maya, his arms crossed, a silent sentinel. He waited while she used his phone to call her roommate. He waited until the Uber pulled up. Before she got in the car, Maya turned to him. "What's your name?" "Crow," he said. "Thank you, Crow," she said, stepping into the car. "You saved my life." Crow just nodded. "Stay out of the alleys, kid." He watched the car drive away until its taillights disappeared into the Savannah traffic. Then he turned and walked back toward his bike, lighting another cigarette. He had a heat shield to fix. The police found Kyle 20 minutes later. Someone had called in a disturbance. They found him unconscious, with a broken jaw, 3 broken ribs, and a shattered hand. He had a rap sheet, it turned out, a history of harassment and stalking in 3 different counties. Kyle tried to tell the police he was attacked by a gang. He said they jumped him for no reason. But when the police interviewed Maya the next day, her story was clear. She had been attacked. A citizen intervened. The police report was ... vague. The responding officers in Savannah knew the local motorcycle clubs. They knew that sometimes street justice was faster than the courts. The report listed Kyle's injuries as sustained during an altercation while committing an assault. They didn't look too hard for the biker. By Monday morning, the story had burned through the campus of the Savannah College of Art and Design and the University of Georgia satellite campus. It was whispered in coffee shops and shared in group chats. "Did you hear about Maya?" "Yeah, some guy cornered her, and then a Hell's Angel came out of nowhere." The story grew, as legends do. In some versions, Crow was 7 feet tall. In others, he rode his bike down the alley and ran the guy over. But the core truth remained. A predator had picked the wrong girl and the wrong night. Maya returned to classes a week later. She was shaken, but she was alive. She walked with her head up. She stopped taking shortcuts. She went back to River Street one afternoon, in the daylight. She walked past the alley. It was just a dirty, empty space now. The terror had been exorcised by the memory of the leather-clad giant who had dismantled her fear. She saw a group of bikers parked near the river, their chrome gleaming in the sun. She looked for Crow, but didn't see him. They were nomads, travelers. He was likely 2 states away by now. But she looked at the bikers differently. She didn't see criminals. She didn't see thugs. She saw the potential for protection. She realized that the world wasn't divided into good guys in suits and bad guys in leather. Sometimes, the suits hid monsters and the leather hid angels. The town knew it too. The incident shifted the vibe in the historic district for a while. The creeps and the predators were a little more cautious. They looked over their shoulders a little more often. They wondered who might be watching from the shadows. Because in Savannah, the shadows didn't just hide victims anymore. They hid consequences. Crow rode west on I-16, the humid air of Georgia giving way to the pines of the interior. The engine of his diner hummed a steady rhythm, a vibration that settled deep in his bones. He wasn't thinking about the fight. He wasn't thinking about the girl's gratitude. He was just riding. For Crow, what happened in the alley wasn't a heroic act. It was simply the code. You protect the weak. You punish the wicked. You respect the road and the people on it. It was a binary system in a complicated world. He stopped at a gas station near Macon to refuel. He stood next to his bike, drinking a Gatorade, wiping the bugs off his visor. A woman in a minivan was pumping gas at the next pump, eyeing him nervously, locking her doors. Crow saw it. He was used to it. The fear, the judgment. People saw the patch, the scowl, the size, and they assumed the worst. They didn't know that the hands that scared them were the same hands that had wiped tears from a terrified girl's face 2 nights ago. He didn't mind. He preferred the fear. It kept people away. It kept life simple. He finished his drink, tossed the bottle in the trash, and mounted his bike. He kicked the starter, and the thunder of the exhaust rolled over the gas station. The woman in the minivan jumped. Crow pulled out onto the highway, leaning into the curve. He was a Hell's Angel. He wasn't a knight in shining armor. He was a warrior in dirty leather. But as the wind whipped past him, he thought about the kid, Maya. He hoped she was okay. He hoped she learned to fight back. The sun began to set, painting the Georgia sky in streaks of red and purple. Crow accelerated, chasing the horizon. There were other towns, other roads, other shadows. And wherever the road took him, he would ride with the knowledge that some angels don't have wings. They have wheels. They have fists. And they don't hold back. The legend of the alley would fade in Savannah, becoming just another ghost story in a haunted city. But for one girl, and for one broken predator, the lesson would last forever. When you stare into the darkness, be careful what stares back. It might just be wearing a death's head patch.